Thank you so much for being here today. I am Analee Vinyard, author of A Legacy of Love, author de Un Legado de Amor. I am very thrilled and excited and blessed today of having here with me today, Danielle. And I know she also has a story. We all have a story, but her story, just like mine, is to empower, to change, to transform beautiful ladies and even men that are probably going through something in life. But first of all, hi, Danielle, for being here. Thank you for being here today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Thank you for the opportunity to share my story.
Yes. Would you share a little bit about yourself, of what your life, or anything that you would like to share?
Sure, yeah. Um, Gosh, the like bullet point checklist are the things like I'm a mom of three girls. I've been married twice, divorced twice. I have a professional career as a coach. I was educated in chiropractic. I'm still licensed as a chiropractor, but I transitioned from chiropractic to coaching. Let's see, almost a decade ago. I have four academic degrees, which is a little wild, and I don't necessarily advise anyone to pursue that many academic degrees. But as many perfectionists and overachievers we are the type of people that just like we want to achieve the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. So education for me was a big part of that process. And as much as I can go on with like the checklist items, I would say most of all, what I feel defines me the most, I suppose, is that I see other people's optimal potential. I see their highest timeline. I see, in other words, what is like what's their greatest way to glorify God? What are they really here? What's their potential that they were born with? And I see that for people, even when they can't see it in themselves. It can be a blessing and a curse at the same time. Because what I've learned, and we can talk more about this, is that it can create a codependent dynamic in me where I'm the one in a relationship who's like pulling the other person along, trying to get them to improve, trying to get them to behave better or stop doing things that are bad for them, to the point where in the past it has been harmful to myself to be the one doing that in relationships.
Interesting. Okay. Is there something that you would like to talk to the audience today? And we all in life, sometimes as we're passing life, we go through adversities and we go through all these different, things that we face at times. Some of those are extremely challenging, some not as much, but some that you could remember or that comes, to mind right now.
Well, staying with the note of, being a codependent person, at least in the past, when I ended my first marriage, I was 29 years old, so I was still quite young. And interestingly, there wasn't a really huge problem in that relationship, or at least I didn't feel like it at the time, but there was financial infidelity. And the financial infidelity then led to all kinds of infidelity. There was an air of distrust between the two of us for quite a long time because of the financial infidelity, and then um, that led to just distrusting each other in general. And once I realized, this relationship is really not what I see for myself in the future. This is not how I would want anyone else to be behaving in a relationship. I was like, you know what? I had set clear boundaries. I had said, if this happens again, this is the end of our relationship. And then sure enough, those circumstances happened again. And I felt like I was forced at that time to make a decision. I either stick to my word or I don't. And I'm going to be a person that sticks to my word. So I moved forward with ending that marriage. Um, Somewhat ironically, just maybe 3 or 4 months after the end of that relationship, I started dating someone that I had known from my childhood for quite a long time. And within just, gosh, maybe 4 months of our relationship, I discovered that I was pregnant. And the irony of this is that in my first marriage, we had tried to conceive for a total of about 5 years and no babies. Which, later having realized that the relationship was not going to be a forever relationship turned out to be a blessing. But I thought I was unable to conceive, or that I would have to try really hard. But that was not the case in this new relationship. I conceived my first child, and from that moment forward, I was like, well, we are now stuck together forever because we have a child together. I had grown up with divorced parents, and I did not want my own children to experience what I experienced, which I believe was a result of my parents being divorced, which I now see quite differently. Um, so even though there were significant red flags in that relationship from the start, really, because I had gotten pregnant so quickly, I just kept making it work, kept making the best of the relationship. And there were things in that relationship that had occurred all throughout the time that we were together, including physical abuse on occasion. And the last occurrence of physical abuse was in September of 2022. And at that point, I said, you don't get to do this to me anymore. I had done enough work on myself at that point where, again, I realized this is not what I would want for any of my daughters. This is not what I would want for any of my friends. I would not want my own sisters to stay in a relationship out of obligation because they felt like they had children, so they had to. And I had no idea how I was going to make it work. I had no idea how difficult it actually would be, but I knew the moment that that had occurred, that our relationship was over, our marriage was over. And so I moved forward with ending my second marriage, which for me, a marriage with children, ending a marriage with children versus ending a marriage without children was way more difficult. Not only that, but after physically separating from my former partner, I began to realize through my own healing process that I had been in a relationship with someone with a personality disorder who was also struggling with addiction, multiple addictions at that. And that really gave me a whole new lens in which to look back on what I had been experiencing in that relationship and realize it was more than just the two of us together create a lot of tension, or like we just can't figure out how to get along. I had been trying really hard to get along for a long time. I had made many requests. I had asked to go to counseling together. I'd asked to go to counseling individually. I was doing a lot of my own healing work. My partner wasn't really doing any, but wanted to appear like they were. And so I started to put together the dots, right? And realize, gosh, this was a lot more than just a difficult relationship. This was disordered. and and like I said, that really created a whole new opportunity, a whole new level of healing that became available for me in regard to being able to see how naive I had been, how I had ignored my intuition, how I had swept things under the rug, how I had accepted being treated poorly for a very long time. And also, acknowledging my role in those dynamics was that I didn't set boundaries. I might say, I want this, but then I didn't have consequences to follow up on the lack of action taken on my request. When my needs weren't met, I just felt like, well, I guess, maybe I'm asking for too much, even though my asks were really only ever to be treated fairly or to receive an apology when I had been physically harmed or emotionally, verbally harmed. Gosh, I feel like the list could go on and on. And so now it's been 2 years since I walked away from the relationship physically and started, the new chapter of healing. And it's been a very interesting journey. It's been a very bumpy ride. There have been phases where I feel like, okay, like I'm doing this, I'm doing great. And then there are phases where I'm like, this can't possibly be any worse. And will this ever actually end? So what I've learned now is that it won't actually end, because at least not while my children are children. Um, because legally we are required to, at least some extent, co-parent the children together.
Mhm.
And that means that I have to be really clear with myself about what I will and will not do, regardless of what anyone else thinks that I should do.
Mm. Okay. Um, what would you say if there was someone right now here listening? You're on the other side right now. You're trying to find the norm, something that is normal in the midst of healing, in the midst of change, in the midst, and most definitely it was difficult for you in that relationship, in the previous one. Um, what would you tell someone that's listening to us today, um, that they're dealing with this right now, that they're still in that relationship, and like you said, now if you would have been able to see those red flags, if you would have been able to pay more attention to all those things, or the inside, when something is not right. You're
Mhm.
always, even though you want to dismiss it, or you want to not pay attention to what's happening around you. That happens very often. We find ourselves wanting to have, you have these hopes, these high hopes that the relationship is going to change, that you could actually have that magic pill, or that magic, way of changing that person, because that's what we tell ourselves all the time. What would you tell if there's a lady or even a man that's in this kind of situation, this kind of relationship? That they're still there and they're still stuck, and they know that they're in the dark place, and that they want to move on, but they just don't know where to go. They don't know where to start. They're always trying to excuse them. They're always trying to justify their behavior, because that happens. What would you tell them?
Well, it's like a tough love moment. At some point, you have to decide, are you ever going to choose yourself? Are you ever going to choose what is best for you? And as difficult as it is, no one else can do that for us. I obviously, my children are children. They couldn't make that decision for me. They couldn't give me permission to leave a relationship that was physically, emotionally, mentally, and financially harmful to me. My family members, my own parents, my siblings, they also couldn't give me permission. I had to get to a point where um, I had to decide to choose myself. I had to decide to choose what was best for me, even when it didn't feel like it would be best for my children. But I realized that I had been prioritizing what I thought was best for my children for so long that I was not really the best mom that I could be. And I had to just cultivate trust and faith in the belief that by doing what's truly best for me for the long term, I will then be the best for them for the long term as well.
Yes.
And I didn't even realize how much work I had ahead of me in regard to the way that I was mothering. As I mentioned to you before, I was also codependent with my children, and I bent over backwards for my children, which, in our culture, there's kind of this notion that that's what being a good parent is about. It's doing anything that we can for our children. Yes, perhaps, but my children knew no boundaries. They had little respect for me. And that was a hard realization to come to, because I realized, there was no one that I could blame that on. That was on me. It wasn't their fault. That was how I had been parenting them. I had trained them, taught them essentially that if they were disrespectful to me, they got what they wanted from
Hmm.
me. And that was also how I had trained a lot of other people to behave toward me. If you're just disrespectful enough to me long enough, I'll give you what you want from me.
Hmm.
So it's been a very challenging process in regard to changing that dynamic with my children, because they're children and they don't like it. Right? And it's not as if I'm having that conversation with them the way that I'm having it here now with adults that are listening, but essentially I've had to just tell them we're creating new boundaries. We're changing some of the dynamics of our relationship. And I know that it's hard for you. I know that it can be hard to understand, but I promise you, I'm always making whatever choices I'm making with your best interest in mind. And it may not seem like that to you, but that's okay. And it's my job to carry the weight of that.
Yes.
So we've also come a long way, together in how we relate to each other. And I have to give a lot of credit to my youngest child. My children are 13, 10, and 6 as we're recording this. And my youngest child is the most resilient and adaptable. And when I have said, something that was going on amongst my children were that they would fight and they would get physical with each other, even as girls. And I instated a new rule in our family. I said, if you harm someone else physically, if you pull their hair, scratch them, kick them, slap them, whatever it is, then your electronic devices are put away for a
Mhm.
period of time. And I made that very clear to them. And they're not perfect at it, but they understand now that if they engage in that behavior, it doesn't matter if they were angry or if someone else upset them, that's still the consequence. There were no consequences for any um unwanted or negative behaviors before. But my youngest child, she really, like, she takes it so seriously. When I say this is what we're doing, this is the new rule, she takes it to heart, and she is like the law enforcement of the house. She
And
knows that if someone has broken the rule, this is what's happening.
so it's definitely helped the changes that you've done with the kids, the people around you, where you even maybe even friends, people, I'm not gonna say relationships, but maybe friendships, the kids that you've now established boundaries and they're healthy ones, which you didn't have before in place, and that has made a big difference, right?
Yeah, I often think about how I want them to be if they choose to have children when they're adults, right?
Yes.
And that's something that has really motivated me, even when it feels hard to make the changes that I've made with my children and in the way that I mother them. I think, do I want them to learn to let other people walk all over them? Or do I want them to know how to set boundaries and how to hold those boundaries with other people? And then I know if that's what I want for them, then I have to be the one that models that to them, because they are learning not by what I say, but what I do.
Yes, and that's the best legacy that you could actually leave them. That legacy where they could always go back and remember, this is what my mother, was teaching me back in the time. That's the best legacy that you could leave them. Now, what would be the last message that you would like to leave the audience? And as well, where could they actually reach out to you?
Sure. Well, I love to connect with people through social media. So I spend most of my time on Facebook and Instagram. If you want to connect with me there, please feel free to message me and just let me know where you heard about me. My last message for you would be to decide where your integrity is. And what I mean by that is we're often tolerating things in our relationships that are actually outside of integrity for us. But because we think, well, I love this person or they love me, it's okay for this to happen. It's actually not. Even if that person tells you that they love you, even if that person, is sometimes nice to you or sometimes treats you the way that you want them to, we get to decide that it's okay to make decisions based upon what's in integrity for us and what's truly not. So, just like going back to that moment The last time that I was physically abused by my former partner, I knew at that moment, this is out of integrity for me. Under no circumstance would I advise anyone else to, yeah, just brush it under the rug. It's, sometimes that kind of thing happens. Never, right? And so because I wouldn't encourage someone else to tolerate that sort of abuse, I had to be honest with myself and ask, why am I allowing myself to be treated this way? And that's when I realized this is so out of integrity for me. I have to choose something different and essentially be right with myself. And by being right with myself, then I can be right with God as well.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for being here today and for your message that definitely it will inspire a lot of ladies, a lot of men, and it will bring a lot. It's going to be an eye opener, I believe, really, because a lot of people need to know that it's okay not to be okay, but it is not okay to stay there. So have a wonderful day and thank you so much for being here with me today. Bye-bye.